What we hear about HTML5 is, that it's so awesome in the future. It's the new Web 2.0, it's the new DHTML, it's the new Ajax, it lets you kill Nazis while riding unicorns. But what it really is, you see that there's always a lot of buzzwords and various technologies that are always associated with it. Wow, my resolution horribly changed. Most of them are not HTML5, despite the buzzwords. Some of them used to be HTML5, the stuff in blue. And a lot of it, whether it's part of HTML5 or not, is actually just JavaScript. Oh, that's horrible. So all this other cool stuff is actually not part of my presentation at all. As far as browser support, it really depends on what you're doing, but yes, even blue-eating Internet Explorer will come out with an HTML5 parser when 10 comes out, which is good. Most of the fighting is between WebKit, Gecko, and Presto, of course. They don't have Opera in here, which is too bad. So, is HTML5 ready yet? The technical answer is no, but there are things that you can't use today. But what you have to keep in mind is that it says in really big letters, draft. Anything you choose to use, do not cry if it suddenly breaks 2 weeks later because they took something out of the spec. This happened with the WebSQL database, which isn't technically part of HTML5, but it was a spec. 3 browsers implemented it. A bunch of developers said, oh wow, great, cool, I can do SQL commands in the browser, and it's not in the spec anymore. It's been replaced by IndexedDB. Since I'm not going to get to these at the end, can I use .com as a place you can pretty much look up to see which versions of which browsers support which particular things. Dive in HTML5 is Mark Pilgrim's site. He's got a book out on the O'Reilly table, which is good. It's not called Dive in HTML5, but it will tell you everything you need to know, including JavaScript detection for any particular feature. And if you want to know what you should be using and how you should be using it, HTML5 Doctor is a good place to look up any particular tags or JavaScript or whatever. And, yeah, I don't have the book, but there's also a pretty decent book called Introducing HTML5. The second edition is coming out where they pretty much backpedal on behalf of what they said because the spec changed so much. I'm going to skip this stuff. Basically, the coolness that was in Xforms prompted a small group of people to say, can't we extend HTML instead of abandoning it for XHTML? And W3C said no. So, this small group said go ahead and do it anyway. They called themselves the WhatWG, although I'm going to call them the WhatWig. They stole their logo from the Riddler, apparently. And after 2 years of getting pretty far with this new version of first bringing Xforms in the forums, then later Web Applications 1.0, the W3C said, oh, well, what are we going to do? They killed XHTML2. It died. It's dead. XHTML is not the future anymore. So we have 2 different groups writing 2 different specs. The W3C first copied everything that the WhatWG had started with. So they started out okay, and now they're doing this. So if you want to look anything up, you actually gotta look it up in 2 places, and there'll be big words draft everywhere in big red letters. So be careful. And a bunch of stuff from XHTML2 did make it into HTML5, but in a more backwards compatible way. Modern markup is a mishmash of old stuff and new stuff. It's based partially on, they looked at how browsers actually parse HTML, and we say a lot of stuff to it, and the browsers hear a lot of blah, 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 actually. So everything that's in green here is blah, blah, blah. Everything on the left is maybe something you've written, everything on the right. If it's green, it's ignored. Very unhappy. And my servers are very slow. One of the things you'll notice right away is that we have shortened doc type. This will work all the way back to IE5. This is one of the safe things you can use. You can just say doc type HTML. If you don't put anything after the word HTML, if you don't have the word public, then browsers don't go looking for the refer. Browsers have never read doc types. Doc types are for validators, but they do check to see if you have one to determine if your page is written in the previous millennium or after the year 2000. And there's lots of other changes, shortened character set and whatnot. And you can leave out the types, line types for the style sheets and the scripts, because I never looked at those anyway. So for JavaScript, you don't have to say Texas JavaScript, which wasn't even right in the first place. When you built your old HTML pages, there was no structure. There were a lot of divs, and you named them structural names to tell yourself what they were, but they didn't mean anything to the browser. HTML5, HTML5 tries to make some structure out of this, and if you have a browser with an HTML5 parser, it will actually create something called a document outline that actually has structure to it. The problem is these names are a little bit misleading, so before changing your div ID equals header into headers and footers into footers, headers don't have to be at the top, footers don't have to be at the bottom, sides don't have to be on the side. They have meaning, which I don't have time to explain. From XHTML2 we have, and this is not technically part of HTML5, and you can use this today with HTML4 or XHTML1. Please, please, please use them. This is one of the most awesome things in the universe. But we have roles, not whose roles, of course. But they also give structure to page to basically just screen readers, but that's fine. So for the blind, visually impaired, we're using a screen reader. If you're careful with these, you can really make your page actually mean something and have a structure to it. Here's another example of an HTML5 page. We see what's called the sides on the bottom. Articles also can have a structure. More new tags. I'm going to warn you about this one. It's in the spec, and then it's out of the spec, and then it's in the spec, and then it's out of the spec. So a lot of people like to use it, but just know that it might not be in the spec in the future. HGroup is supposed to group multiple headers. And we have new elements like the figure element and fig caption, which is only if you have a caption to something. It can be a video, it can be an image, and you want to structurally connect those. Oh, I don't have time to go through all these tags, which is too bad. Look at the posted last week. There's a new element for that. It's called the time element. And you can put whatever you want inside. You have a datetime attribute, which has to be machine readable. And you could put pub date on there, which tells supposedly all machines that, hey, this is the date that this text was published in. Resolution got all screwed up. This is the so-called flash killer. It's not going to kill Flash, so get that out of your minds. There's a shortened version that's just, it's got a closing tag and an open, and you put the source in there, but nobody's going to be using that either, because HTML5 does not say what kind of codecs or what kinds of videos are going in here. So you get to make about 5 different versions of every video you want to put online if you want to use the video one, because we'll need the MP4s for the Apple people, we'll need the WebM for the Chrome and Opera and newer Firefox, and we'll need the OGG for older Firefox if you want to. And inside then, you're going to have an object tag with your Flash, because you're still going to have Flash, because everybody who doesn't do HTML5 is probably going to have Flash. So you're still going to have Flash. And if they don't have Flash, you're going to have a download link. So this stuff degrades very nicely, but you have to be okay with having, 4 or 5 different versions of your video. The WhatWG has a new tag called the track tag, and if you have timed information in your video, then you can have captions or subtitles added to it. However, the W3C doesn't agree in what they chose to use for the file type for that kind of information, so it's in one spec and not in the other. So you can use video today so long as you have fallbacks like this. Track is something that if you want to add it, you can, and whoever supports it might support it, but don't rely on it. Video element is very similar to audio, except you only have 1 track instead of 2. We've only got the soundtrack. So same thing, you can have multiple sources in there, and you can have a Flash fallback. HTML5 has lots of new attributes, and for those who aren't sure, an attribute looks like this. Or it can be a Boolean, where all you see is the name of the attribute itself. So we've seen this before probably from Microsoft, content editable. It is now part of the spec, because HTML5 is partially a retro spec, and it's part of paving the cowpath philosophy. So they saw things that browsers were already understanding. They said, well, let's put that in spec. Browsers understand it. Everybody had copied some version of content editable. So we have new JavaScript. We have the state that is content editable, and we can put in some commands. The data foo attributes are pretty cool. If you're making up new words that don't exist for attributes, simply so that your own personal scripts can grab information about them and do stuff, that's what the data foo is for. You'd have inside your elements, you'd start with data dash, and then you put in whatever you want to be your key, and equals whatever you want to be your value. And then in JavaScript, you can do the name of the element dot dataset dot your key, and you'll get your value. We have 3 competing different kinds of metadata. Microdata is kind of supported by the WhatWG. Microformats have been around since forever, so if you're already using them, you might as well stick with them. RDFA, if you're already using it, you might as well stick with it. The WhatWG doesn't like RDFA, they don't like microformats, so this is one of those unstable things. We have ARIA roles, and see if I can show you what's neat about this. HTML5 has added something else. Used to be you could only have your IDs actually start with a letter. Now they say we don't care what it starts with. It could be any character that's got a Unicode point. So I can add ID equals heart, and then I can actually style it with the heart. That's something new from HTML5. You could always do that with classes. Where's the mouse? This is horrible. All my stuff is gone. -10 at the index is now legal. And a little note about the Booleans versus ARIA in HTML5. If you have the name of an attribute that's Boolean, if it's in there, it's true. That means even if you say that equals false, it's true. You have to actually remove it entirely with JavaScript. But if you're using the ARIA ones, and I just don't have time to get in these, it's just too bad. If you say false, it's false, and if you say true, it's true. So there's a difference between those two. Yeah, too slow. Forms suck because it's like herding cats. And with old HTML forms, you have kind of a limited set of means to actually get people to do what you want them to do, because you want them to put in the right information in the right format, in the right field, the right time the first time. And with forms, we're just kind of limited in how we can herd them. Yeah. I get to skip all kinds of stuff. Well, no, I have to go back because this old form doesn't show you anything. I wish I had more time. Opera supports HTML5 forms. It's actually one of the few browsers that support a lot of the new things. We have placeholders. These are not done with JavaScript. We can have multiple comma-separated values now inside inputs if you use the multiple attribute. We have a URL type that if you type in something, it tries to add the protocol in front of it. And we have something called data list, which is kind of cool. Sometimes you want people to choose from a list or type in whatever they want. So with this, it's kind of neat. It doesn't always work out unless you tab to it, but so you can choose something, or you can just whatever. We have a new type called number, which makes what they call a spin box. And if you look in Firefox, it's just like a regular one. We have type as range. We also have a new element, it's called output, that will actually output what the value of the range is. We have the dates. This is an Opera book. I'm not supposed to do that. But with dates, the browser gets to choose how it shows. So it's kind of imitating a lot of the JavaScript people use for dates. But I can now choose a date. You can say a minimum date, you can say a maximum date. There's a time type. And I have a new attribute in there called step, and I say it's every 1800 seconds. So people have to choose between every half hour, or you can type it in yourself. This one is really useless, but they have a type as color. If you don't have a mouse, you can't choose a lot of things, but if you do have a mouse, you can choose all sorts of colors. I don't know what it's for. There's also a new attribute called form, where you can have you have your form appear, and then maybe you have another form control outside the form. That used to be a no-no, because how did you send stuff with it? All sorts of stuff is broken and hooked up to the system. It's too bad. We have a new thing called form, and it can link to the ID of the form. And you can look at, you can say, oh, all this stuff that's all over this page. When the form gets sent, it gets sent with the form. I wish I could go through all this code here because this is where all the cool stuff is, including pattern. You want to force somebody to follow a particular regular expression. You can put that in there and the browser will catch it rather than JavaScript catching it, which is quite cool. So forms have lots of new types, new attributes, and new methods. And I don't have time to go over these either, which is too bad. Most of these, it depends per browser if any of them work at all, but what's good about the form ones is that these are all input types. So any browser that doesn't understand the input type, it will default to text, which for the most part is good. Oh yeah, I don't have a wide enough one. Canvas is something that's getting a lot of buzz. I have no idea what people would use it for except drawing pictures, because that's all it's good for is drawing pictures. It's a 2D API, there's also a 3D version, where all it does is change the colors of pixels on the screen. Is that 5? Huh? Oh, the 1. Right. Don't build GUIs out of Canvas. Don't build anything that's supposed to actually do anything in Canvas. Only build stuff that looks pretty in Canvas, because there are no objects in this. In fact, there's not even any primitives except for a rectangle. So it does stuff and it looks pretty, but please don't build anything in it. And I'm going to have to wrap up, because JavaScript has been updated because they didn't figure the DOM as an afterthought. So there's lots of new JavaScript stuff that you can technically say is part of HTML5, because every time you add a new element, it gets to have new methods, and there's new global objects and whatnot going on. So I only have a minute, so I'm going to stop here. And yeah, thanks.